Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Second 960. I wanted to finish up tonight with a couple of comments on the economy because I think Don Rapley had some fascinating comments in regards to really creative destruction, allowing the markets to work and allowing capitalism to do its job rather than what he described as socialism for the rich or socialism for banks and keeping everyone afloat and allowing the restructuring to take place that he would think that the market thinks should take place. A couple of comments. I got four, I think. First is that there's a new thinking that's coming out a little bit, and I think it's called deficit economics, and it's a comparison between Keynesian economics and monetarist economics that suggests that inflation is high when deficits are high and the market doesn't have confidence that governments will take action to reduce deficits in the future. And so it's really, it's sort of increasing the spread, the risk associated with the probability that governments actually don't reduce deficits. This came about because monetarists during the last decade or so, when interest rates were so low, kept on saying, well, this is going to lead to high inflation, and it didn't. And there was this real question about why it didn't, because if you followed monetarist economics, it should have. And we've had huge deficit financing, and it also didn't seem to have an impact until of late. Well, what happened? I think that the deficit to GDP, the kind of numbers and budget projections during most of the last decade or so prior to the pandemic were such that the market had confidence that things would be solved in the future. I think that the incredible amount of spending during the last couple of years during the pandemic because of pandemic spending, but also then, spending on top of that, particularly in the United States, but also in Canada and elsewhere in the Western world, has led people to this, had led people in the market to the expectation that deficits won't be brought under control. Budgets won't be brought under control, certainly won't be brought into surplus, and a real concern so therefore the ability of governments to pay back means that money is of less value. And so therefore the way to make money of less value is to increase inflation and decrease the real value of the current currency. I think this is really kind of interesting. What it says is that it's not necessarily high interest rates that are going to cause a recession and bring inflation under control. It's going to be governments that have to be disciplined that are going to bring inflation under control. And given all the complaints that people have about all the different causes of inflation right now, the war in Ukraine, supply chain issues, etc., I think they may be right. High interest rates may not do the job. So that's number one. Number two, I think, is moral hazard. I think if the government continues, if the Fed, if Bank of Canada, if the central banks in Switzerland, et cetera, continually step in and save entities that should be going bankrupt, what is that going to say? That's going to say to people that, hey, banks can take risks because they're not going to be allowed to fail. Someone's going to solve the problem. And I really worry that if banks never fail, then banks could take on as much risk as they want. And I think that's a problem. Third issue is this idea of creative destruction, the Joseph Schroeder idea versus zombie companies. And so therefore, if you help out the economy all the time and you don't allow capitalist creative destruction to take place, you're going to end up having some companies that really should go bankrupt, be allowed to exist in the long term, at least in the medium term, and they're going to be, and they've often been referred to as zombie companies. And what that does is means that capital, people, innovation, etc., are captive of something that's not productive long term. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. You've got to have a way of actually getting capital and people and innovation and attention and marketing and all that kind of stuff out of those companies that aren't going to be successful long term into the new places that they should be. And if you don't allow things to go bankrupt and you keep them alive all the time, then you're never going to have that creative destruction. And then I think the final point, and we really talked about a lot of this in the show, is this: because of the low interest rates, because of this massive increase in debt, because of therefore the massive increase in housing prices and real estate prices, we did have an incredible misallocation in the Western world, but particularly in Canada, to real estate, away from the innovative economy. And you got to ask yourself, if that happened, yes, it happened, but did that harm the balance of the economy? Which is what one of John's argument is, that it takes money, time, attention, debt, capitalist desire, and entrepreneurial efforts away from maybe more innovative parts of the economy, and puts it into just house flipping, apartment flipping, investor after investor in condominiums in the real estate market. And his argument that really real estate should go up by inflation or by the real growth in incomes makes a lot of intuitive sense. If you've got reasonable supply and it's not an investment, it's really the place that you live. Really, what you want to do is, over time, you want to spend the same amount of money on housing, and so therefore, we should make sure that supply is such that that real estate, as a percentage of personal disposable income, spending on real estate is about the same over time, and it's not been. It's actually doubled in Canada, from about 100% of personal disposable income in net debt to 200%. There was a fascinating but scary bar chart in the most recent Economist magazine that showed that Australia and Canada and Korea have some of the highest debts to personal disposable income in the Western world. And we're almost twice what the US is. So we spend more than half of our twice as much of our personal disposable income on housing as the United States. There's a problem there. And so I think all these things suggest we've got a real issue. And John's comments about maybe we should allow some of this restructuring to take place, allow real estate prices to come down, allow some of these banks to go bankrupt. Maybe that's the creative destruction that we need in the marketplace to actually end up with a better world, a better market, a better Canada. It's worth thinking about. That's our show for tonight. Good night, everybody.